Indeed, it is Easter, particularly Easter Monday, the day after resurrection. Christians all over the world celebrate this day, commemorate this day, which marks the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Lots of lessons to be learned in this one. And as you can see, we've been joined right here in our Lagos studio by Venerable Adeyemi Agbelusi, who is a clergy and also an accredited mediator and arbitrator. Good morning and thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily.
Good morning.
And happy Easter Monday to you, let me add.
Happy Easter.
You know, festivals like this are not just for the festivity sakes alone, not just for whining and dining, a public holiday. There's always a significance, a message behind all of that. And this is coming at a time where Passover, Easter, and even Ramadan are coming literally at the same time. So for Easter, for millions of Christians around the world, what is the lesson? What is the significance that we should bear in mind while we're tearing apart the turkeys and the chickens and what have you?
All right, thank you very much. I perfectly agree with you that the celebration and the chicken could be a distraction, but Easter, again, is just another ritual of the church, another celebration. And it's a lot like a piano and music. So if you play the piano and there's no music, then it's pointless. And if you listen to music but you don't understand the piano, there's also a disjoint. So yes, it's important to know the reason for this season. Now, I always like to situate it in the fact that the church has a calendar. I always emphasize that.
Yeah.
So Easter doesn't stand in isolation. So we started from Advent till the Christmas. Then we moved down to the baptism of Christ, Epiphany. And then we came into a period when we were going to have mass baptisms and renewal of faith, which was done yesterday. So that was done at Easter, and we had the Lent preceding that. And at the end of Lent, we went into the Holy Week, which is what you're talking about, the overlap with Judaism, and I'll come back to that. And then we come into the Easter, then Easter Monday, then we go to the Ascension, then Pentecost, and then we enter into the harvest or Trinity season. So in reality, the Easter and the Passover are almost identical. And for the last 2 years, they've overlapped, Ramadan, Easter, and Passover. And the significance of it really is very easy to say it's about freedom. Because on Palm Sunday, the Jews will go to the temple, historically, to select a lamb that they will offer for Pesach, for Passover. And that was when Christ entered into Jerusalem. Now, when they also are examining those lambs, Christ also examined it was being examined by the Pharisees. Yeah. Then when they were cleaning their houses, preparation for the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, which we call Monday, Thursday, Christ was cleaning the temple. Then on Monday, Thursday, they celebrated the Passover, or the Pesach. So they had the matzah and they had the mayim, which is the bread and the wine. Christ also instituted the Holy Communion. Yeah. Then they entered into the Good Friday, which was really now when they slaughtered those lambs. And as those lambs were being taken all over Jerusalem, it was like snow taken to be slaughtered, Christ was taken to the cross. And then they entered into the high Sabbath of Saturday when they all rested. And then on Sunday, which was yesterday, they celebrate Bakurim, which is the feast of the first fruits. And we also celebrate the Easter, Christ being the first fruit of a new creation in Adam. So there's a context to everything. So the Passover for the Jews represents freedom from Egypt, marking the Exodus, which is really a deliverance. And so Christians also mark it as a deliverance from sin and death, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally. And that's what we should find in this. So what was Egypt to the Jews? It was not really a bondage. It was a system that degraded them. They were in hard labor. They had to rely on people for their food and their existence and how they lived. And so coming out of Egypt, God said, let my people go that they may serve me. They may be human. And so their freedom from Egypt was not just about free, it was about freedom. God would have probably just struck Pharaoh dead and just use one big plague and release them. But no, it was a process to take them out and then make them to the Jewish nation. So the Christian celebrates also a deliverance from depression, losing hope, being stagnated, and seeing that through the pathway of suffering, one can emerge as a better, renewed person. There can always be rebirth. No matter how things are totally destroyed, there could always be rebirth. I was happy that the church in Owo that was destroyed but I think about 10 months ago was opened yesterday. That was very significant for me because it shows that the church again rises from the ashes of that death.
You know, this is a cycle. As you said, the church has a calendar. I mean, others have their calendars, and it's literally a cycle. Every year we have these festivals, commemorations. The Passover, for example, started way before Christ. The commemoration had started. He participated in it, as you said, and it was symbolic. Even he himself going to the cross, symbolic of the Passover, the lamb and all of that. And then Easter after Christ has been commemorated thousands of years. But these challenges still persist. Hopelessness. I even think that right now, coming off COVID-19, and then for a lot of people, the elections in Nigeria, they probably can relate more with hopelessness now than ever before. So these challenges, looks like they're not going away. So how do we still find significance, power in these festivals amidst the myriad of challenges that seem to be growing by the day?
Beautiful. Awesome question. Now, Christ says to us, shortly after their Easter and his ascension, he says, in the world you will have trial and tribulation, but be of good cheer, or be happy, because I've overcome the world. So I don't think suffering will ever end. With the global forces of change, economic disruption, technological disruption, globalization, currency, and realignments, the world will never get better, to get darker. But you as an individual will always have to resolve to be of good cheer. Nobody has the right to make you unhappy without your permission. So the message of Easter is that you need to be able to look at the Good Fridays of your life, which have been many of them: a failed marriage, loss of a child, loss of a business, dashed hope at elections, all kinds of things, but still say to yourself, something better is possible. A better future lies ahead. You know, the looking forward to the salvation and the comfort that God brings. And it's significant that the next feast after Easter, which is the Sukkot, we come after the 50 days from now, is really about God sending us what? The Comforter, to be with us and to keep us in the difficulties and the hopelessness which you just alluded to.
Relatedly, if you look at the cross, the message from the cross, they're timeless messages, messages of love, messages of sacrifice that, Christ represents for us, message of forgiveness. At the cross he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, those who canvass for his crucifixion on the cross. And these are the things, that Christians stand for. These are the virtues that they profess. This was the starting point of our conversation this morning on the program. So it's a paradox, when we go out into the world and you find that a lot of Christians who go to the church every other Sunday, every other midweek day to profess these virtues do not practicalize them when the true test comes. So how do you explain this paradox?
Okay, well, the Bible says that we hold this treasure, this news of salvation, in earthly vessels, or unclean vessels, that the excellency may be of God. So in reality, yes, there's always a disconnect between religious people and spiritual people, or people who profess religion and those who actually practice it. That has always been. In fact, it was religious people who crucified Christ. I always find it significant when you're reading the Easter story that they took Christ to the house of Pilate and they had set him up that, look, ask for Barabbas and make sure he's crucified. But the reason they didn't enter Pilate's house was because they didn't want to be defiled so they could celebrate the Passover. So that always, I found really so amazing. So you're going to take a man's life, you're setting him up to be murdered, but you don't want to enter into the house of the Gentile so that you are not defiled. So you always have this paradox of, people who are just cloaking or masking as Christians or whatever faith, but don't practice it. But again, it comes back to individual choice and decisions as to what moral values, what ethics you want to live by.
Are you saying those who are hypocritical in the profession of their faith are the religious ones?
Oh,
yeah. Those
I mentioned that.
Who stand for what they believe?
Yes, in Jerusalem this week. I was in Jerusalem 3 years ago, and I was amazed that on Wednesday I couldn't get out of any of my friends. I was at Hebrew University, and I was, what are you guys doing? So we're cleaning our houses. So why? So tomorrow is Passover. So they have to clean their house, literally, as in deep clean, and then they preparing for the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, removing every dust and every yeast. I mean, meticulous cleaning. So for the Christian, we don't clean our houses. We're supposed to clean our heart. So at Easter, in the Anglican Church, we have what they call the Easter anthem. It says, Christ, our Passover lamb, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep this feast, not with the unleavened bread of hypocrisy, but with the leavened bread of sincerity and truth. So the church reminds us that we must stop being hypocritical and cleanse our hearts. Cleanse our hearts. The whole process of the 40 days of the Lenten period, and I'm very sure that that's the same thing with the Ramadan, which is almost gone, is about self-examination, seeing the dark side, because we all have a good side and a dark side. Like I always say to people, you have Brother Balogun in church and Balu Baba in society. It happens everywhere.
So should there be a disparity? Should there be?
Well, becoming a person of integrity is the margin of these two. So in reconciling these two, and it's a conscious effort. So Easter and the church feast helps you to self-reflect and to examine yourself, like we do just before we come to the communion, and then ask God to forgive you, and then renew your intention to go out and live. And it's significant that when we end the communion service, we always say, go out in peace to live and to love and to serve the Lord. And we say, in the name of Christ, amen. So the church dismisses you at every communion, telling you to go again and start again and do it. But I'm not sure people really get the meaning.
And I imagine that, Christian leaders also get to a crossroads as well, in decision making, where their Christian faith clashes with tough decisions that they have to make that do not necessarily align with, Christian values. What counts? I'm trying to find an example now, that could match up easily with what we're trying to talk about. But I imagine that you catch the drift.
Yes.
So what counsel will you be offering for Christian leaders whose decision-making clashes with their Christian faith?
Well, in Ezekiel 34, God talks about giving us good shepherds. So, just like you've always had the cliche, many are called but few are chosen. And many who call themselves by different religious titles. And I don't think that should impress anybody. In fact, it has become so bad that if I travel now internationally, I just say I'm Dr. Agbelusi, because I've almost been strip searched at several international airports once they say, oh, you're a priest. So it is really a dirty word. I mean, I've been in England before, I was in my collar, I was entered the shop, and someone said, you get out of here, you pedophile. I'm like, excuse me? So that's really where we are. So religious leaders really need to know that there's a need to start practicing what they preach, becoming good shepherds. The church exists to influence the world, to take care of the poor, not to become general overseer that people worship. So they must take that heart of humility and service, which is why on Monday, Thursday, one of the rituals is that the Pope or the pastor, whatever, washes the feet of the parishioners, telling you symbolically that even though you are called leader or you're called father, you're really called to serve. Your greatness lies in your service.
Very interesting point made there, but let's toss this to Abuja now. Nyata.
Thank you, Kayode. Venerable Agbelusi, thank you so much for coming in. I just have one question I'd like to ask you. You talked about the significance of Easter, and the Christians are celebrating Easter, the Jewish religion celebrating the feast of, Passover and First Fruits, the Muslims also have some kind of celebration all around the same period. The three major religions are having about the same celebration around the same period. But you, being a certified arbitrator and seeing that this is coming almost immediately after the general elections in Nigeria, what should we be thinking about reconciliation? How can we use this season to reconcile the different sides of the divide? I mean, bringing everybody together for the purpose of moving this nation forward. How can we do that as an arbitrator? What areas, what are the things we can bring into all of this?
Okay, thank you very much, Nyota. I'll use your words, because as an arbitrator, we always break down the disputes into issues. You say, how can we advise the people of Nigeria or the nation to apply Easter to their lives? Now, the first thing is, what is the definition of a nation? And if you Google that, you'll find that a nation is people who are bound by common ethnicity, language, history, culture, and society. So, does Nigeria have a common ethnicity? Does Nigeria have a common language? Does Nigeria have common culture? Do we have common society, and do we have a shared history? No. And this is why you find a lot of agitation. So one of the things we can do to resolve this dispute is to realize that we need to create tribe Nigeria. We can have a common ethnicity in terms of our national values, and being able to realize that we must define who the Nigerian is. You know, I've read the pledge over and over again. I pledge to Nigeria, my country, to be faithful, loyal, and honest, to serve Nigeria with all my strength, to defend unity and uphold our honor and glory, so help me God. And the question is, when our youth read that, when our leaders read that, what's Nigeria in their mind? What picture do they visualize? So we need to realize that our ethnicity should become Nigerian ethnicity. Our society should be governed by norms and culture. Our culture should be honesty, hard work, reward for diligence, and respect for one another, human lives. Our language, of course, is English, but it should not just really be the spoken language, but the non-verbal language of love and empathy for each other. I mean, 600 people have been killed in Benue in 3 weeks. 6,000 have died on the road accidents. 88 kidnapped, and nobody really cares, you know. So these are Nigerians, these are citizens.
And I like the point you made about tribe Nigeria. That should be the big picture. Just in a minute, as we wind down or less, how are religious leaders handling this trend? Looks like religion is losing its significance. A lot of people grew up in church, for example, and right now they say, well, I don't want to have anything to do with religion, even other religions as well. So how are you handling this? Is this a trend that scares you?
Thank you very much. I mentioned the 5 things that define a nation. Religion is one of them. So religion won't define a nation. If anything, throughout history, it has destroyed nations. So in reality, religion is private. And so when our ground norm says Nigeria will be a secular state, it's right. The church has a place in the transcendent world, because our kingdom is not of this world, in bringing that to their members in their different locations, whether traditionalists, whether Muslim, whether Christians. But coming into society, becoming salt and light, then we now become people who work in the media. We use sports, we use teachers in the school educational system, we use music, we use these things to bind our country as a nation, with our religious values telling us, 1, love, sacrifice, and be hopeful, have a clear vision of a better self. Like in conflict resolution, we say all conflicts start from the intrapersonal conflict.
Venerable, I know we can go on, and I really hate to do this, but we are totally out of time. In fact, I had to squeeze that in, but thank you so much for the insights. Venerable Adeyemi Agbelusi is a clergy and accredited mediator and arbitrator. Thank you. By the way, if you want to catch that interview, you can always rewind or join it on our YouTube.